Now what I have here is a BMW iX. Now I've been living with it for the past week, and over the past few years it's won numerous awards. Now I am curious, as we're in 2025, does it live up to the hype of when it first launched? From the futuristic design on the inside to the luxurious ride, this is my review of the BMW iX. Well, there's no way of getting around it. This is a big car. As I recently just tested the BMW i5 Touring, the iX is directly comparable to the BMW X5. And if you're familiar with other SUVs, this will be similar to Mercedes Geely or maybe even the Volkswagen Touareg. But BMW have definitely had some feedback over the past few years about, well, their grills, more specifically their kidney grille. They just seem to be getting bigger and bigger, and the iX, even in 2025, is no exception. So you kind of either love it or hate it. One thing I do like though are the LED lights. These are extremely sharp here and very futuristic and modern. Move down the side, however, and this is where it starts to look a little bit different. So first of all, the handles, well, they don't protrude away from the bodywork at all. They actually have keyless built in, and I'd imagine they're designed this way for aerodynamics and efficiency in mind. So keyless built in, you can tap here and it will lock, and then your hand goes under the handle and it will unlock, just like that. One thing I would also like to add as well are the windows. Now these are frameless. Interesting and very, very futuristic. But one thing I do like is, of course, the black around the windows. I'm always a sucker for that because car manufacturers will either choose to do it in usually chrome, like polished chrome, or black. I do like it in black, and I do love this colour combo as well. Now the rear continues that futuristic design, but notice this: when you open the boot, the entire back goes up, and including the rear lights. So BMW have actually got extra lights here, you know, just in case you've got the boot up in the dead of night and cars are travelling down the side of the road. They need to be able to see, so they've kind of incorporated it that way around. As I did mention, it is very similar to the BMW X5 and like a Mercedes Geely and Volkswagen Touareg. So length 4,953mm, width with the mirrors 2203 and height 1696. Now there's three different types of electric motor options you can choose, so I'll go through these tech specs in a little bit more detail in a bit, but I have the xDrive 50 version. Now xDrive is BMW's four-wheel drive technology, and let me just say, it does stick to the road like glue, and rather luxuriously I'll say, but again, more about that in a minute. I just wanted to touch on price first. So starting price starts at $79,885. However, the one I have here, well, as it's xDrive 50 and has a few optional extras, and when I say a few, I think it might be fully loaded because the optional equipment alone is £15,000, meaning that the total price of this car is about £118,000. So yeah, there's quite a lot on this one. Now guys, just before we jump on the inside, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're loving the video. I do post weekly, but as we're in 2025 now, I am looking to post a little bit more regularly, so I'd hate for you to miss out. So hit that subscribe button down below if you want to see more videos just like this. Anyway, on with the boot. So when it comes to the boot is 500 litres, as you see right here. There is also a little bit of underfloor storage space as well, which is pretty good. If you do fold the seats down, this will go to 1,750 litres, so that is pretty good. And of course you can take this out as well, but yeah, simple switches just to fold the seats down. We do love that. Underfloor storage space, there are actually two cables under here at the moment, and with room to spare, and you can even fit something really thin and small in there as well. So boot is quite impressive. One last thing is that there is a 12-volt socket just over there as well for good measure, just in case you have a, I don't know, a portable fridge or something you want to put in the back for those long road trips, or a rear dash cam. Right, let's put all that back and have a look at those rear seats. Okay guys, well, as is customary with a lot of my videos, I of course review the car up front, and I very rarely actually sit in the rear seats, and this is my first time. And yeah, that is set up for my driving position. As with all my videos, I always like to clarify this: I'm 6'2". I have longer than normal legs, so yeah, very, very long legs, and a slightly shorter body, but that is my driving position. And yeah, there's plenty of space behind it. It's very, very roomy. I will say, even up front, when we get there in a minute, BMW have done a slightly different thing, and it makes the cabin up front so spacious, but we'll get to that in a second. Loads of headroom here, and if you include the glass, I can get, you know, my whole hand and more above my head there. So yeah, loads of space. I especially love this sunroof as well. It doesn't have a blind at all, which sounds like a negative. However, BMW also have a trick up their sleeve on this as well, which I believe is optional equipment and is a fair few £1,000s, but it's pretty cool. I'll show you that in a minute. The climate controls down here, which is very nice because there are heated seats for the rear passengers on this particular model, so very good. And USB-C ports up here as well, with what looks to be some sort of rear seat entertainment option or pre-installation for. Anyway, I can imagine you could probably install some form of screen there or something powered by USB-C. And of course in here we probably have cup holders, and I'd imagine these are always over-engineered, as always in most German cars. Fancy cup holders in there. Now, in terms of the build quality on the inside, we'll touch on more of that up front as well, but every surface you touch has that really squidgy leather, which you only find on premium cars, and I found that very much up the front as well, and so we'll go through that in a second. But there are no harsh plastics anywhere really. Even that's got a bit of leather on. It's very difficult to... I found some behind here, but that's, you know, that way. Everything else that you touch here has a very squidgy leather feel to it, surrounded by ambient lighting on the windows as well, even in the door pockets, even on my feet as well. So very good. And of course this is a EV platform. There's no transmission tunnel here as well, so very good, very spacious. I just personally wouldn't have a lighter coloured interior, especially this kind of cream one. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I personally have it in black. Right, well, let's show you up front where BMW have gone for a different approach in terms of increasing that kind of airiness, spacious feel. BMW have gone for this approach and this design, and it's surprising actually how more roomy and airy it feels in the front here. And I would definitely describe it as one of the most spacious interiors I've been in quite a long time, considering the car's not too large dimensions. I mean, it is a big car, but just this kind of openness down here, I'm not actually sure what you would do with all of that down there, to be honest, because you can't really put anything down there in case it rolls towards the driver. I guess you could put a bag down there, but yeah, it's interesting because normally it's all sealed off, but yeah, not in this car. And another thing that is slightly different compared to some other BMWs I've driven is the button on the door to open it. So that is very different. That's taking something from Tesla's book. Now, I want to touch on build quality first, and very quickly, one thing I do love, especially when you go to a high premium luxury tier car like this, is one thing, if you have the heated seats on, the heated steering wheel on, the panels heat up as well. It's such a high-end exclusive thing, but it is very nice. But yes, with the build quality, it's exactly the same in the rear. Rather than just having that kind of well, I can't really find it anywhere, that leather, oh yeah, on the bottom down here, rather than having that sort of leather, up here is even more softer leather, so you can actually see when I put my finger on here, squidge in just a little bit, and that is everywhere here, even on the dashboard as well. Everywhere your hand goes, there is a nice premium leather squidgy material, even more so than like your, you know, premium cars. This is where it starts to go to luxury interiors, and yeah, gotta love it. One thing I will say though, you must keep sharp objects like keys away from here. So I wouldn't have any sharp keys in my hand when you're going near to press the door button, as that could pierce the leather because it's that soft. So quick tour around the front. So in here we have a button which is going to open up a little bit of storage space in here, a little shelf just there. Then we have traditional BMW layout here, of which I will say is all high gloss black. I'm not a huge fan of high gloss black, but there again, in my own daily car, a Mercedes A-Class, so nothing like in the league of this car, but I do have a lot more high gloss there, and I do, you know, have to carry like a lint-free cloth to keep it clean, so I'd only advise probably the same thing here. But yes, this is where your start-stop button, gear selector or drive selector, drive modes, and wheel to control the screen, which we'll get onto in just a second. It is touchscreen as well. There's wireless charging down here, 2 USB-C ports down there, another 12-volt socket there for any accessories, and 2 cup holders for good measure. The only thing I will say is though that if you're going to use a third-party dash cam, because there's, well, nothing there, you wouldn't be able to power it using the USB-C ports or the 12-volt socket unless you were happy with a cable going that way, unless it went under the floor, which well, looks to be a little bit more tricky. So just something to note if you like using a third-party dash cam. I mean, it's not the largest glove box in the world, but there is one there. And then in the middle there's a hazard switch just there, demisting for the front and demisting for the rear. Those are physical buttons. The rest of the climate control is all touch, which again is on the multimedia system. We'll get to that in just a second. Finally, the steering wheel. Now the steering wheel has a kind of weird design. Normally they will either be completely round or kind of had like a sportier button, but this is just kind of like an odd shape. Not seen this style before, especially on the BMW, but there again I haven't tested many BMWs, but it is, I mean, it's quite supportive up here. I do quite like to grab a steering wheel in that position, but it's just a slightly different shape. All the buttons here are those haptic buttons, so they're not like touch buttons, so you can't accidentally swipe. See, this doesn't do anything on the screen. The multimedia system, the actual screen is suspended by these supported bits here, so it's floating off the dashboard, which is quite good. From my position here, it looks like it's integrated, but I guess from maybe the position of the camera here, you can see this looks like it might be slightly curved toward the driver as well. But there is so much space up here, which I guess is a good thing. It does not feel cramped in here in the slightest. So yes, multimedia system. This is one of BMW's latest multimedia systems. You guys will have to let me know if you want me to do like a full review of the BMW multimedia system. I'll happily do that for a future video this year, but I'm just going to go through a brief overview here. Now, having used BMW electric cars quite a few times, I know their sat-nav system very well, so just a very brief overview in a kind of demonstration here. If you navigate to a place using the built-in sat-nav, of course it will do the usual things, give you live traffic and that sort of thing, but then notice on the bottom left here, I am 86% charged currently on my battery, but it will give you some reassurance of what your battery is going to be when you get there on that 81%, kind of just up the road. So sat-nav making that transition to EVs just that little bit easier and a lot more supportive. In terms of everything else, you'll actually notice along here is your climate control. So yes, this is all controlled via the multimedia system, not using any physical buttons. You can operate it using voice, so there's a voice assistant as well, which I'll touch on briefly in a second. But climate control, just tap in here and you can control ventilated seats, which this car has, heated seats or heated steering wheel, which I've got to say is very nice and does include the panel heating on this particular car. But tap the fan and this will bring up everything else that you can adjust. So you can adjust your temperature just by tapping these, and then the rest of it's all controlled on that menu bar there. For everything else, you'll want the menu button here, which will bring up everything that this car can do. Now, when you first jump into BMW, this does look a little bit confusing, because if you go to all apps, there's a whole page of literally apps, and it can get a bit confusing. What I'd recommend is use the things on the left hand side where it says infotainment. This is all the general things you're going to use day to day, radio, music and various different functions. But then if you go to vehicle, these are all the customization and settings you can do for the car itself. Now, if you're not a fan of using the BMW multimedia system, of course there's wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto on compatible phones as well. However, as this is an EV, an electric vehicle, I would recommend to use the inbuilt multimedia system just because it will help with charging in public. But if you don't charge in public, then Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are there as well. So yeah, very, very easy multimedia system to use. Now, I did mention there was also a voice assistant as well, and you can activate this by saying, "Hello BMW, how are you doing today?"
I'm fine, thanks for asking. Enjoy your drive.
I will enjoy my drive, because it's about to rain. Speaking of, let's take this out for a spin. Okay, right, so let's go through the tech specs. So, of course, the one I have here is the xDrive 50, but there is also the xDrive 40 as well. So here's all the tech specs for both. They both have a dual motor, but most importantly, the horsepower is slightly different. The xDrive 40 is 326 horsepower with a 0 to 62 of 6.1 seconds, whereas the xDrive 50 has 516 horsepower to 523 horsepower. I think it varies around the world slightly. This has a 0 to 62 or 4.6 seconds, which we're going to test any minute now. The xDrive 40 has a 71 kilowatt hour battery with a range up to about 264 miles based on WLTP. Now for the xDrive 50 battery, that is a 108.8 kilowatt hour battery with a range up to about 382 miles, so significantly more. Just bear in mind the charge time will be slightly longer on that larger battery. Now, one thing that I noticed, especially while driving this over the past week, is due to its large size, you know how big this car is, the curb weight is actually just over 2,600 kilograms. So it's quite on the heavy side, and you do notice that slightly, certainly if you take you know, any harsh corners or that sort of thing, you know, in the countryside, or do what I like to call spirited driving. So yeah, it is a heavy car, but the ride quality is superb in this. We'll show you a bit more of that in seconds, but first I want to test that 0 to 62 on my famous bit here. So I'm going to put this into sport mode using this, and what was it, 4.6 seconds we need to beat. Okay, let's try this out. Okay, let's do this. A little bit of wheel spin. Oh, there we go. Yes, 4.17. Well, that's good. Even it was starting to slip just a little bit, just 'cause the roads are starting to get a little bit wet, but yeah, there we go. So as we know, with all electric cars, they don't make a sound, and they do have to make a sound on the exterior. But what BMW have done is collaborated with Hans Zimmer to make, well, this sound. It's very, very interesting. There's actually a couple of different modes you can choose. So this was sport mode, and you can turn them off if you don't want them, I will add as well. Now, as with all electric cars, for those of you who are in that space, you'll know that there's, of course, brake recuperation. And this BMW is no different. It has different levels you can adjust. There are 3 levels, but there's also an adaptive mode as well, which I have been using. Surprisingly very good. It'll slow down automatically for you as you approach another car, or if you're using the sat-nav based on different junctions and that sort of thing. Yeah, you can turn it off if you don't want it, but I find it amusing. It's not too loud, but it's just something to listen to, because obviously electric, there's nothing really there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the ride quality of this is beautiful. It is running on adjustable suspension, and it is adjustable using that mode, so you can go on here and go from personal to sport, and you really do notice a difference. So I'm in personal right now, and it's just gliding across the bumps in the road. Now, one thing I wanted to add, just with the suspension side of things, when I'm in the personal mode, so the standard soft mode, I would describe this suspension setup as very, very, very smooth, as in almost Mercedes S-Class smooth. So this would be very similar to the i7, the one with the big screen in the back. It's so smooth. And considering as well, this car does have large wheels on as well, so yeah, pretty good. If we change it to sport, it does get a little bit firmer. The seats do hug you more, which is actually quite good, especially for that sporty driving. And I've noticed the suspension is that much, I'd say firmer. It's just you can feel the road more. It's still very, very smooth, but the personal mode is definitely the more floatier one. You notice it change instantly. But yes, as I mentioned earlier, the specification of this car is, well, very, very high. For example, the sunroof here has a thing called electrochromatic glass, which I mentioned that there was no blind. And that's because there's a button here which basically controls how much light comes through. And I think it's electricity, how it works. But it can go from transparent to opaque just like this at the flick of a button. It is very, very clever. But yes, with all of this in mind, the luxurious drive, all the gadgets, what are the pros and cons of this car? Let's talk about it. So guys, starting out on the pros first. So the first pro I want to give is the impressive range that this car has. You know, considering it's almost 400 miles. Appreciate that it does have quite a large battery, but yes, almost 400 miles, 380 to be precise. It is pretty good. However, there is also something to note. If you went for the xDrive 40 version, of course, the battery and the whole experience of range and that sort of thing will be slightly less. So just something to factor in, but the fact you can get it in this car is pretty good. It's like a long range version. The next pro I've got to give is the luxurious and futuristic and spacious interior, because this sort of design here, you don't see that much in cars. I think I've seen it in a couple of EVs before, but this is the first one I've had hands on with this open airiness feel. And there is just so much space in here, and there's very, very few plastics with that super soft leather material virtually everywhere. It's just a really nice place to sit. Which brings me neatly on to just the build quality in general. It's just so well put together everywhere. And you would hope so, obviously, for the price, because it is quite up there. But, you know, there is one that will start at around 70,000-ish, and that has a very, very similar build quality on the inside. The only thing I will say is that when you do open the door, of course, because they are, you know, pillarless at the top, this can wobble a bit, and as you shut the door, you will feel it kind of wobble at the top, but then it goes up and then locks into place, and then it's silent in here afterwards. But yeah, just something I thought I'd mention. But yeah, that's what you get with pillars, kind of frame doors anyway. Now on to the negatives. Well, I've got to say, I think the first one, a bit like the recent i5 Touring that I reviewed for the week. I guess BMW have obviously very, very high spec cars, because some of them can go very, very expensive. This isn't even the most expensive one, but I guess that's the price you pay for, as I mentioned in that review. If you want a German car, then you want a big SUV German car, then you want it to be electric, and then on top of that as well, you want it to go fast. It can just keep pushing that step ladder of pricing up very, very, very high. Now, as this is an EV and, you know, quite a high priced EV, I do compare it to other electric cars in the same sort of kind of price segment. And of course, this one doesn't have a frunk. Now, I personally have never owned a car with a frunk, but there are electric cars out there that do have a frunk. And yes, I know this does have a bit of space in the back under the floor, but just thought I'd mention it, that of course there is no frunk that I mentioned earlier. And then lastly, although I don't really see this as a con myself, but there again, I do appreciate that there are many people out there who do own a BMW at the moment and, well, just aren't too keen on the exterior design. And that is mainly the kidney grille on the front, just because they have got larger and larger over the years, and BMW don't have to put that there, I guess, because obviously this is an electric car. It doesn't need a grille. It could just be completely flush. But the design they went with that, I know that some people don't like, and certainly on some more classic BMWs, the grille is a lot smaller. But hey, that's the design that BMW go with at the moment. But just one thing I thought I'd mention. But yes, guys, there we go. That concludes this week's video on the BMW iX. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And of course, if you want me to cover a particular car, let me know in the comment section as well. But thank you so much for watching. Until next time, see you then.